All right, it's another Monday morning in the shop, and we have a couple of Chevys that we are trying to make some progress on and trying to finish up. One, my project, the all-wheel drive second gen S10, we're trying to get it back on the ground. And then the second project, we have Dom's Turbo Silverado, and we are trying to make some more headway on that. Chris is right now hiding inside the fender well, trying to see how well the downpipe does or does not line up. What do you think? What do you think is so far?
50-50. Part of it does, part of it doesn't.
So we may need to tweak it a little bit, but there's a lot going on. Dom's putting an 80, I think he said 85 or an 88 millimeter turbo under the hood. So it definitely takes up a lot of space. And we're using a turbo kit that I've never personally used before. So we'll keep you guys updated on progress on both. Like I said, my main push is going to be for the all-wheel drive S10. I just want to get the bed back on it. We're in the middle or the end of a 3-link suspension project. Just this morning already, I got the axle painted, I got the links painted, and then now we have everything rolled back inside, and it's time to put it back together. So we'll start with the links. We'll start with, just the brake cables and stuff like that. We'll get the shocks in, and then we'll get it on the ground. Fingers crossed, we'll get the bed on, and hope it fits. So Dom's truck has a narrow band, and he also has a dual wide band set up, one of which we're going to put right here. So we need to add another bung. And this is, I bought this a while ago. This is one of these fancy coped or like radius ones from Stainless Bros. So as you can see, it makes for like a perfect gap all the way around. That's the part number if you want them. All right, it's time. Do you need me to be useful and actually help you? Or can I just hold this?
I think I got it.
All right, that's a turbo.
That's in the way.
Yeah, depending on how we clock that too, because I think this compressor needs to be pointed down to come out. So I'll have to play around with that a little bit.
I think if this one, shorten this end up a bit.
Yeah, because that's almost right on the hot side too. And you can't turn that. All right, we just tried getting the lower section of the downpipe on. Right now it is hitting pretty heavy in between the pinch weld and the up pipe. So Chris is gonna take the up pipe off and see if we can actually slip the downpipe in, because right now it is a major no-go.
Not all the way clamped in, so I try and stuff the crossover back in.
But it looks like it at least kind of fits though.
Yeah, it looks like, I believe that would be the right angle.
Yeah, it looks like it's more or less pointed. I mean, we can work with that because we're building exhaust anyhow. But then what about the up pipe?
It's gonna touch, but it looks like they'll line up.
You said it'll touch but not line up?
It looks like they'll line up, but they'll touch.
Okay. So downpipe in first and then crossover.
That's the way it looks.
All right, we got most of the hot side installed. We have to do just a little bit of tweaking here. When the wastegate sits on, it won't quite line up. This is what we've got. And this is a really tight fit for everything, but that's where the wastegate wants to sit. And as you can see by that, I mean, you could maybe bend that flex coupling really, really hard and get it to fit, but that's not right. So we're gonna make it right. So these legs have a right hand thread and a left hand thread, and you can tell the left hand by the little groove that's machined into the tube nut and the jam nut, kind of like right there. And I paid attention to the lowers. I wanted the left hand on the back, but on the upper, I did not pay attention. Does this make any difference at all? No, functionally this will work just fine, but we gotta switch that because, well, you know why, I'm crazy. All is right in the world now. Alrighty, Monday is come and gone, and we've actually made pretty good progress on both projects. S10 is sitting on the ground, and we did discover a handful of issues with the turbo Silverado. Nothing too major, obviously nothing we can't fix, and it's just kind of one of those things that you learn to expect when it comes to installing aftermarket parts. It'd be nice if everything fit right out of the box. I'm not knocking anybody's product. I've seen this across the board, but we're just gonna have to make a few tweaks to get this thing to fit just how we want it. First of all, on the lower part of the downpipe, oh, and worth mentioning, this is a 4-inch downpipe, which it does take quite a bit of work to get a 4-inch downpipe installed. One, we had to fold back the lower pinch weld. You can kind of see it right there, just because it would hit and there's no way to even get the downpipe in. Two, we're gonna have to do a little bit of a heat and beat on the downpipe because right now it is touching the frame and it's also touching the manifold. So there is no way to like press or twist or clock this downpipe any further in to open up clearance there. So we're just kind of have to do a little bit of heat and beat there. And then finally, this is the big one, the connection between the wastegate and the downpipe where it circulates. There was no way that this was gonna line up. Even with this flex coupling in here, you'd have to like crank it way down and crank it way out. And then that would just barely get the V-band to touch up top, but it would still have a gap down below here. And these flex pipes aren't really designed to compensate for poor fit up. They're really only designed to allow for thermal expansion. So Chris is reworking that short section of material there. When he gets the fit up how we want it, I'll weld it together for him, and then the downpipe can pretty much go in the truck for good. So, oh, that's really hot. So basically, Chris made it really short here and had to add length there, right?
That's what it is.
All right. So don't pick that up right now. All right, so I'll put the little clip up that shows how it fit up in the beginning, and this is how it fits now. Pretty much zero gap. We had to add about 1/2 of an inch here. We probably took off maybe 3/8 of an inch there. So everything is clamped up. It's all solid. I'm just gonna get a couple of welds around here, a couple of welds around here, then we'll take the whole upper down pipe out of the truck and finish weld it. All right, Tuesday midday update. We're making good progress again on both projects. Chris has the downpipe now rewrapped and reinstalled, and everything fits perfectly. I'm really happy with it. We had to do a little bit of heating up here just to clear the frame. We talked about all that already, but now the hot side is pretty much permanently installed. You got the crossover in too, right?
Yes.
All right, so other than that, you did have to widen out the slip fit coupler. Will the springs fit? Okay, the springs won't fit. Maybe we'll try to find a longer one or something. But anyway, hot side is done. The S10, I just went upstairs and I remodeled the rear suspension in the little 3-link calculator that I used, just because when we designed it, a few things have changed since then, like my tires are a little bit taller, and the link positions did change ever so slightly just based on what actually fit in the chassis. So initially, I had targeted 75% anti-squat, which would have looked sort of like that. Now, I have 78.97%. So that's pretty much in the ballpark. We still have adjustment up or down, but to get 78%, I'm just gonna move the upper link to the top hole on both the axle side and the frame side. So highly recommend finding one of these spreadsheets. They're online, just Google it. But if you're doing any sort of custom suspension work, you gotta have some idea of where the links are pointed so we know the chassis will act how we want. So anyway, we'll move the upper link, we'll start tightening stuff down, we'll get the brakes bled. Oh, and then I still haven't dialed in the pinion angle yet. That'll be like the very last one, but we are pretty much in the home stretch. So we can do burnout soon. So here you can see what I was talking about on the springs. One good big bump, that upper spring mount could just fall right out. So I actually did order 2 new springs last night. They should be here tomorrow, so hopefully we can fix that for good. All right, uppermost hole. Go. You okay, James? Yeah. Okay. Now, yep, there we go, front driver. So he goes around the fuel filler. It's a truck again. Oh yeah. You know, it's funny, I get comments every time someone sees me start a lug nut with an impact gun, and I don't understand why, because, like, obviously if you just go nuts and jam it on, you could cross thread it, but if you're careful, it goes right on. And yes, these will get torqued by hand. All right, Tuesday has come to an end and the S10 rear suspension project is pretty much wrapped up. I just took it for a test drive. Everything went pretty smooth. Just made sure, you know, that the coilovers were adjusted. I do have another set of springs on the way because I am going to have to swap those out. But other than that, everything is done and I am really, really happy with it. And of course, we had to do a test to see if the wheel hop returned, because remember, that's part of the reason why we tackled this 3-link conversion in the first place. If you remember, the wheel hop looked like this before, and now it looks like this. It's basically non-existent, which is awesome because we couldn't add a whole lot more horsepower to this truck with suspension as bad as we had before. But now we've got the geometry dialed into where I think it will need to be. If not, we can make some adjustments later on. But so relieved that this suspension project is finally done and now we can free up a bay in the shop and I can just start driving the truck. And after that, a little while later, we'll begin the LS swap, which that's going to be a whole lot of fun. But anyway, that's a project for another day. We are making more progress on the turbo Silverado. We have the hot side 100% installed. We're trying to figure out a turbo drain because the few fittings that I got didn't quite fit with the clearance that we have in between the T6 flange and the center section. So we're trying to come up with a solution there. Let's see what else. Oh, Chris is getting the boost controller wired in. We're going to do some wire relocation, like we're not running a mass airflow meter anymore, so we'll get rid of these wires and we'll run the 2 wires for the IAT back through the harness and make it look all neat and nice. We're also going to redo his injector connectors because he has just those plug-in adapters, which we don't like. We're just going to hardwire it into the harness. One of the next things that I'm going to do on the turbo truck here is with the radiator. He did get this aluminum radiator that's a little bit narrower than stock. That's going to help fit the intercooler because the intercooler pipes are now going to come in here. But unfortunately, this one, the pipes aren't quite the right size. So this one is too big. This one is actually the correct size for the bottom. So I'll cut this guy off and I'll move it down here. And then I have a new smaller tube that we're going to add kind of in its place. Obviously won't be quite that long, but that way we don't have to do any sort of stretching hoses or anything weird like that. And then I got a couple more bungs that I'm going to weld in, one for the steam port return and one for the return from the coolant reservoir. By the way, all this stuff we did pick up from Summit Racing. They have pretty much anything you need when it comes to fabrication projects or fittings or hoses or any of that stuff. So links below for a lot of the parts that we use. And as always, we love Summit. Anyhow, that's what we're going to do for the radiator. Then we'll get the fan back on it, and then we can get the radiator permanently installed, get the hoses made up. We do have a fresh set of intercooler brackets on the way. And a transcooler bracket. We'll show you that when it gets here, but that's pretty much our Tuesday recap. So let's continue on. Like a glove. Yeah, buddy. So we got the first round of welding done on the turbo truck project. So we got the new lower hose installed, or hose barb, I guess, installed, new upper one. And so the deal with these two here, this is for the steam vent return, and this is for the coolant reservoir return. And the reason why these are important, on the LS's, I'm gonna interrupt Chris here, they've got the steam vent return, which is that guy down there. The factory returns it through a hose into the top of the radiator. Now, a lot of people will just drill and tap into the water pump, which is fine. I just don't like doing that. So we added the steam vent. And then finally, the overflow tank, this is an aftermarket one, but the factory one does the same thing, has a line that connects here to the top of the radiator. And I believe its function, because we did just double check on Chris's Tahoe, it's mounted at the very top of the radiator. So I believe that's like an air pocket vent, for lack of a better term. So definitely good options. And then we just welded in the IAT bung for the upper charge pipe. So yeah, a little bit of welding required, not a big deal. We still have yet to do both valve covers and the oil pan. We got to add a -10 bung into each. the valve covers for the breather tank that Dom had installed, or provided rather, Chris installed it, and then a -10 return for the turbocharger to get the oil back into the engine where it belongs. Also, did get a few more goodies from Summit for the S10 project. I got some new springs because before I really test drive it, I want to get that squared away. All right, so we're swapping from a 200 pound per inch to 150 pound per inch coil with the hopes that we won't have any more preload issues, or lack of preload, I should say. And you get a black spring or a silver spring. That's kind of boring. So I chose red. Although in hindsight, red and silver, I don't know if that's a great combo, but I like the red. Give it a splash of color underneath the truck. There's like 3 things to setting up a coilover most people forget. One, this sort of will adjust ride height, but your ride height needs to be set by adjusting the shock mount, so at ride height the shock is kind of in the middle of its travel. This will adjust preload on the spring, and this is where you adjust ride height. Okay, pull it out, put it in, take it back off. Hear much of any difference, do you? It's barely any. All right, stock muffler it is. All right, Thursday update. And yes, I realize I did not do an update Wednesday because we were just so busy I didn't even have time to pick up the camera. But we are making really good progress on both the Turbo Silverado build and the S10, and we're like 99.9% of the way there. In fact, I took it on a pretty aggressive test drive yesterday, and when I was almost at the shop, I took a really sharp left-hand turn with a pretty big bump in the middle of it. And when we got back, Chris said, uh-oh, and looked at the tire. And yeah, that's a brand new tire. I don't want to say completely destroyed, but there's a really big chunk missing. Basically, it went up inside the fender, and there's a sharp edge in there, and it just sliced the sidewall. So in a fit of rage, I grabbed my hammer and I went to town. Try to show you with a light there, but I rolled the fender back quite a bit, and so now it's not sharp any longer, which would prevent any further damage, I believe, but I had a bunch of the guys get in the bed and hop up and down, and it'll still kind of rub if the bed goes down evenly, but I jacked up just one side at a time, and if the axle kind of articulates, it clears by a mile. So a couple different things. Number one, I initially thought maybe the spring rate was too soft at 150 pounds per inch, but I got to looking, and the original lowering leaf springs that I had on here, for sale by the way, these had a spring rate of 138 pounds per inch. So I believe at 150 pounds per inch, like it might not be ideal, but it's at least in the ballpark. Second thing I thought of is a rear anti-roll bar, which definitely could help. Unlike when I took that left-hand turn and the body kind of rolled a little bit, that would help prevent some of that. But also I believe I just need a bump stop. So that's going to be the next thing that I do real quick. And I've already got these guys. They're just I bought them for some project ages ago, and they've been sitting around. But it's just a Timbrern. It's like a load assisting spring, but I'll just drill a hole in the bottom of the frame, and that's a pretty solid rubber guy there that will help stop the axle from going too far up and rubbing. Anyway, but yeah, it's pretty much done. I even added the original exhaust back up underneath just because I couldn't stand the Racer V6 sound. But anyway, for as far as you guys are concerned, this truck is pretty much done, and I'm just going to start racking up the miles. I probably will have to buy one tire for because I don't like that. Anyway, turbo Silverado. We've got all the wiring done. We got the injectors wired directly into the harness rather than using those plug-in adapters, which I don't like. We've got a -10 bung welded into each valve cover. The driver's side is already ran with the, you can see that guy down there, the -10. And the passenger side, I need to get some more fittings and hose on the way, but it's just gonna go from that blue spot to that blue spot, to the True Focus Fab tank right there. We got all the coolant lines kind of where they belong. Upper radiator hose fits nice now, that has the right size fitting, as does the lower. The steam port has a home, and the coolant return from the air vent or whatever that uppermost little guy right there is. Everything has a home where it belongs. Now, today we've been spending some time up front here on the A-frame. We are modifying it so we have room to mount the transcooler because we got a couple different types of brackets, but I didn't really love the place that the cooler mounted. I know there's a couple different options out there, but we're just gonna mount it behind the intercooler. So it'll go intercooler, transcooler, AC condenser, and then radiator finally. But in order to make that happen, this transcooler has to sit not on the face of the A-frame, or what used to be an A-frame, but it has to sit flush with it. So we just got some square aluminum. Those are made from aluminum anyway, so we welded it all together. We're gonna put some paint on that in the morning, and then we should be good to go. Just probably gotta change the hose ends on the transcooler. But progress is progress, so let's carry on. All right, it's the end of the week, and unfortunately, we didn't get to do a whole lot more in terms of projects on Friday, but this week as a whole, we did get a lot done. Turbo Silverado, we've made really good headway. Most of the fabrication work is done. In fact, all of the fabrication work is done, and we're just left with a little bit more plumbing, and then this is pretty much wrapped up under the hood. Then we gotta go underneath, we'll build the exhaust. The S10, you might have noticed in the background, is no longer here at the shop, which means, one, we have some much needed space freed up, but two, I drove it home yesterday. It went awesome. The thing drives straight. It drives true. I didn't even have to align it because, I mean, I aligned it before, but it's still straight as an arrow as you go down the road. And it actually rides awesome. It seems to be a little bit quieter, which is probably also in part due to the new tires instead of those old junky tires I had on there before. I did add the rear bump stops like we kind of talked about. And then I also, if you remember from last week's video, I tried to get some internal frame coating to take care of the inside of those cross members we fabbed up. The frame coating I initially bought didn't really work all that great, but this stuff's a little bit pricey. But I grabbed some cavity wax, which basically sprays using like this really long straw applicator kit. So I just used some of that and I blasted inside the cross members, inside the box section of the frames, and all the other areas that I couldn't really get to. That was like the last step I had to do before I drive it, because if it happened to rain or something like that, or you know, around here the sprinklers run and the water runs down into the road and you have to drive through it sometimes, I didn't want to get any water on those uncoated portions of the inside of the frame, just in case. So it's now ready to start racking up the miles. S10, I do need to rebuild the rear end. So I have some parts I picked up from Summit to do that coming up soon. And of course we have the LS swap in the S10, which I am anxious to get going on that. But now that the 3-link done is, I've taken the S10 and I've kind of put it at the bottom of the list in terms of priority, because there's a few things I need to get caught up on. Speaking of which, next week, Chris is going to be probably hammering out the last stuff that we need to do on the Turbo Silverado. And then I am going to be working on this guy right here. This is the 6-liter LS that we're doing for Matt from Matt's Off-Road Recovery for his 6-wheel drive off-road ramp truck. Remember, it's going to be supercharged. It's probably going to be a 408 stroker when we're done with it. And we just need something that makes lots of torque and a decent amount of horsepower. So I'm really excited about that one. Teardown for me actually begins as soon as I put the camera down. You'll see that in a video next week. But thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate you. I will do some more updates on the S10. I'll probably do some driving shots and stuff like that, just so you guys can see it. Same thing with Dom's Silverado. Once we get that done, we probably won't drive his much because we're not going to be doing the tuning on it. He's got somebody else that he wants to have handle that. But we'll show you everything along the way. Again, thank you guys. You're awesome. Come back soon.